were doing. And so he went and tested this basic program at the University of Washington back in like 2013, and just specifically working with their O line and D linemen. And he was there for a couple of weeks working with their coaches and players. And then the Huskies that year went on to set school records and rushing yards, points. So they were number 2 in the nation in sacks. And they credited a lot of the physicality to the techniques that they were learning. And then at the end of the season, he got a call from the athletic staff that said there were no concussions on those position groups, which, having played at those higher levels, that's pretty unique. And so that's where he kind of realized,
Yeah.
if I can use like these martial arts principles and apply them to the objectives we need in football, well, I can create stronger linemen. And a lot of what we talk about is postures of strength, and a lot of it is very different to how we were taught at the various levels coming through the game.
And as far as how you develop that confidence and that physicality at the same time that you keep them safe, like, is there a progression that you go through with the athletes? Like, where does it start? Like, what are
Yeah,
the levels?
yeah, absolutely. And so, like, a lot of how we train is parallel to the way martial artists train. And I was never really big into UFC or that realm until getting connected with Coach Peters. And when you really see, like, there's obviously differences. You have individual sport versus a team sport. So your practice time or development time is going to be a little bit differently. But how they approach getting ready for a big fight is they use this part whole mentality, where they're working in specifics of their grappling or striking or submission, and then they'll go in the realm of the ring and test it and refine it with a partner. Whereas football, our individual time is very limited in comparison to the amount of team periods we would have in practice. Obviously, the team sport is going to have that, but the things that we are practicing on the individual scale weren't as detailed or methodical as a martial artist would do. So our training protocols are very progressive, similar to a mastery belt level that martial artists go through. It's like you got to master this skill before advancing to the next piece. And so for us, it's we start with postures of strength. It's everybody's connected to the ground. How do we maximize our lower body, the postures we need to store energy, to create energy? How are we applying force? Is it through our hands? Is it through our shoulders? Is it through one hand, two hands? Are we working with a partner? And then obviously it's football, it's a competition. There's going to be some times where you get beat. Are you training counters to the results that you get, right? Everybody can drop plan A and goes, we want to block it like this. We see it in the meeting room on the whiteboard. But there's going to be times where the play breaks down on the field, or your plan A breaks down, and the player who has trained plan B, C, and D is going to be more consistent over time, rather than just a lot of the coaching adage we would give is drive your feet or hit them harder, or you got to want it harder. And it wasn't very specific to the tools needed to the job. We equate it to, if you're going to chop down a tree, you're going to spend time really refining that axe and getting it as sharp as possible to make that as your job as optimal as possible, versus just swinging a dull axe harder and more times. So it's really that front end methodology that's different.
The technique aspect of it, and understanding how their muscles work and everything like that. Do you, with offensive linemen, do you guys really specifically try to get them to be well-rounded athletically? Do you have them more focused on their own position work? What do you do there?
Yeah, I mean, it's always based on the level of athlete we're working with, right? If we're working with a youth player or a high school player, it's still like foundational, like everything you can
Right.
whittle down to your feet, your hips, and your hands. The higher level players we work with, those NFL linemen, those defensive rushers are just some phenomenal athletes today. And so
Freaks.
we'll probably spend more time in the pass pro realm with those guys. Um, but the majority of players are going to be in that high school to youth range, and it's focusing on how do we stay connected to the ground with our hips under our body, and we're not leaning on people. I had a lot of coaches who would say, use your hips, use your hips, use your hips. But they would be teaching me like a push, a press, push it. Most sleds operate on a horizontal plane, but your hip, like you think about a hang clean or a squat, the uncoiled mechanic of your hips and a pressing motion of your hands, like a bench press, those are opposite mechanics of the body. And so you're telling kids to use one and the same and another component, but not teaching the why they work differently. How do we utilize them together so we can maximally put force and effort, our power through our opponent based on whatever the player objective demand is?
Yeah, I mean that's a big part of the offensive line. Where guys have always originally were saying like bring your hips all the way through, finish them. But when you do that, right, you start to get out of position. You may lose
Yeah.
leverage, right?
Yep.
And as opposed to staying with your feet in the ground and being able to move accordingly. Um, is is the offensive line play? It's so interesting because obviously the youth level running and high school running is running the ball is most important. And college is probably mixed, and then the pro, obviously, passing game's a little more important than the run game, and then of course, obviously, the people they're playing against differ as they go up to different levels, right? So speed becomes more and more of a premium on the defensive line as you move up the levels, right? And these guys are flying. One of the things I noticed in like the last few years, probably since maybe you stopped playing, but last 5 to 10 years. But what I noticed is that the defensive, especially well inside and outside, but outside especially, they're so fast. Like it's irrelevant to how tall. Sometimes they're tall, sometimes they're not that tall, but they're super fast. And the offensive tackle, and whether it's left or right, because sometimes there's lefties now at quarterback, which there was a time where there really were not that many of them. Um, that tackle position is where guys were like when they were drafting them, I would say in the 2000s, and when you played, you could kind of pretty much rely that if you drafted a left tackle or a right tackle for the lefty guy, that he was going to be pretty good if you drafted him high. And now it's become a little more of a crapshoot because of the speed of the ends. Because a guy could be dominant in college, play at a big school, be dominant because physically he's more dominant, and the guys rushing are not quite as fast. But at the NFL, all these guys are right, and they're all fast, and maybe even faster than ever, right? They're almost like running backs that are lining up like tall running backs. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
If Adrian Peterson bulked up 25 pounds and was a defensive end, that's who you have half the time rushing off the edge. Guys that are like 10 400-meter dash guys that got big, and that's changed a lot because you see guys drafting guys in the first round or second round. Those used to be slam dunks, and they're not. What are some of the things? Because that's difficult as you go up the ladder for the offensive linemen as they continue to progress. How does an offensive lineman continue to transition their skills accordingly over time? Because in one aspect, right, each phase they're required to kind of be a little bit different as they go up the ladder.
Yeah, there's a couple components to that. I think the biggest factor that, the current college game has really created a lot of problems through, whether it's the transfer portal, NIL, lack of development time. Like
Mm,
the NCAA puts all these rules on, like in the off season, like there's so much time you can be with your position coach, and instead the position coaches end up, basically trying to imprint assistant strength coaches with all this, O-line knowledge to go work with their players because they can work with a strength coach, but not a O-line coach. So development is not necessarily prioritized like it could be or should be. Um, and then with the amount of kids that are bouncing from one school to another, and they're getting a lot
mhm.
of different coaching philosophies. And
Yep.
so a kid, and this is, I really think, like, if I'm an offensive lineman coming out today, it's like I'm putting a lot of weight not in the NIL, not in the logo or the colors. It's like, who is that coach? What is he going to teach me? What is his pedigree of, what's his line of work of helping guys get to that next level. Because if I'm playing for a coach who's prioritizing development, I might have a shot at that next level. And the thing at the highest level is the NFL. Those 32 teams, they all value different things when it comes to linemen. And
Right.
there used to be, like my last year in Indianapolis was the year Peyton was hurt, and we went through a bunch of different quarterbacks, and then they fired everybody. They brought in Pagano. They brought in a new GM who wanted 6'5", 335 linemen across the board. Well, they ran Andrew Luck out of the league because they went through the most starting lineups of offensive line playing in the
Yeah.
history of the game in 5 years. So it's not just big farm strong guys.
Right.
They got to be able to move. And so it's a combination of having fast feet. There is a level of strength that is required at that level. There's some coaches who prioritize arm length. Sometimes detrimental. You can find a guy that can tie a shoe standing up, but sometimes that's a hindrance. You can't
Yeah.
play O-line. Like I've had guys in the O-line room that would dominate in a world's strongest man competition, but could not move their feet to save their
Can't move a
life.
buddy. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and so there's so many variables that people get caught up in. I've seen guys get drafted solely based on the school they went to. They're like,
Right.
oh, well, he played in the SEC, so I'm